Well, good morning. I'm Curtis Ballenger. I'm on the staff here at the beautiful, magical Marianist Retreat Center in Eureka, Missouri. And if you haven't been out here lately, this is a great time to come out. Everything's beautiful here. Everything's in bloom, except the iris. They've been in bloom and now they're not. But it's a great time to come out and use some of the features on the grounds and just enjoy a day outside, get out of the house. Encourage you to do that. We've been doing a series of reflections, staff members and members of the board and others. And today I have a reflection that's based on devotion and commitment, two words that are not interchangeable, but they certainly go together. And not just devotion to God, but also devotion as it applies to other human beings. There's a story in the Old Testament that's familiar to most Christians that I think is perhaps the best example we have in demonstrating what devotion really means and how it plays out in the lives of those who are earnestly devoted in love to another human being and to God as well. And it's the book of Ruth. Ruth is, I don't know if it's the shortest book in the Bible. It has 4 chapters. It's easy to skip over. It's kind of hidden between the book of Judges and the book of 1 Samuel. So it's a very short story, but it gives us much food for thought. And I think it's included in the Bible too because of its historical significance, as we will mention. So let me give you a brief synopsis of the story of Ruth. The story begins in the land of Moab, and Moab is a kingdom that's adversarial to the kingdom of Judah, and it's across the Dead Sea from Judah. And it seems that a man named Elimelech, if I pronounce that correctly, whose wife was named Naomi, and 2 young sons left their home in Judah in the land near Bethlehem, in fact, and there was a famine in the land, and they were suffering from that, and apparently heard that things were better over in Moab. So they journeyed a substantial different distance over to Moab. And they were there about 10 years, and while there, both of their sons found wives that were Moab ladies, and one was named Orpah, not Oprah, but Orpah, and the other son married a lady named Ruth. But things didn't go well in Moab for the family, as the husband, Elimelech, passed away, and both sons died in Moab. Must have been a coronavirus there, maybe you think. But anyway, these 2 deaths left Naomi, a widow, very distraught and bitter, with 2 daughters-in-law, both of whom were very devoted to her. Well, because of the customs of the day, and we still see this over in countries in the Middle East, a widow, a woman without a husband, and has very little standing. And so she, at that point, was very vulnerable, and she thought that it was in her best interest to not stay there, but to journey back to her homeland, where at least there were some relatives that maybe would give her a hand. So she decided to head back to the area. It was near Bethlehem. And so she set out with the 2 daughters-in-law. But down the road, she had pangs of conscience and felt bad towards these 2 young women, and felt that they would be better off to go back to Moab, where they had family, go back to their mothers and fathers, where maybe they could find other husbands and live a better life. So she Naomi directed the two girls to go back to Moab. And Orpah decided that she would go back. And there was a tearful separation there on the road. But Ruth, on the other hand, had a stronger devotion to Naomi, and it was so great that she was willing to endure any danger, any tribulation that she might have to face. And at that point, here comes the passage that we're all familiar with, that's been the source of a lot of songs, and I'm going to do one for you after a while. But Ruth said to Naomi these words, "Entreat me not to leave thee, nor to return from following after thee. For whither thou goest, I will go, and where thou lodgest, I will lodge. Thy people shall be my people, and thy God my God. Where thou diest, I will die, and there will I be buried. The Lord do so to me, and more also, if aught but death part thee and me." So that's a song of real devotion. And so the two women headed out and went back to Bethlehem, and there they had great difficulty. Things didn't go well for them either. A widow and a foreign single daughter-in-law. But to cut to the chase, there was an honorable man there named Boaz, who was wealthy, and he sort of came to the rescue. Naomi directed Ruth to go to Boaz's fields of barley and to just go after the fields had been harvested, to just pick up whatever was left and maybe get enough to be able to bring it back where they could make bread and live. Well, Boaz recognized Ruth and appreciated her work ethic, and he took an interest in Ruth and Naomi. And he ends up even buying some of Elimelech's land that Naomi and Ruth were living on. And he took Ruth as his wife. And guess what? Ruth bore a son whose name was Obed. And Obed was the father of Jesse, who was the father of King David. And we know, of course, that our Lord is of the house and lineage of David. So presumably through Mary, I think, I'm not a biblical scholar, but since Jesus was not a biological son of Joseph, I assume that Mary was a part of that lineage. So now you know the rest of the story. So what can we gain from the story of Ruth? Well, first of all, we learn that loss is hard. Loss is very difficult. Naomi's life had crumbled. She virtually had nothing and was in great grief. So life does have its hardships, and we know that God doesn't prevent us from having hardships, but he does give us the means to deal with those hardships. And of course, we're all living with some hardships right now, and our trust in God needs to help us through these times. The other thing that I think is important in this story is keeping commitments. Ruth was very brave in keeping her commitments to Naomi, staying with her, taking care of her, instead of looking to her own interests. And so the words that we heard Ruth saying to Naomi did not come easily, because she was going into unknown territory from a country that was adversarial toward the country that she was going to. And we learn something about bitterness too in this story. Who can blame Naomi for being bitter towards God? She even, in the story, she even wanted to change her name. It seems that the name Naomi means pleasant, and she recognized that that didn't apply to her with the bitterness that she was feeling. and she wanted to be called Mara, M-A-R-A. Now, the story didn't explain what Mara means, but I would assume it means bitter or sad. So Naomi felt that God had brought misfortune on her, and it would seem that she had every reason to feel bitter towards God for letting these things happen. And perhaps we can all identify with these feelings. Character comes into play too, especially when it comes to Boaz, who demonstrated that he was an honorable gentleman. He stepped up to the plate and took responsibility and protected or restored the reputation of Naomi and made it possible for Ruth to gain respectability in this foreign land, when he might easily have turned his head and let the chips fall where they may. So the book of Ruth is not just a love story. It's a story about God and how he restores those who look to him with hope. He takes a destitute widow and an also widowed young woman, Ruth, a foreigner, and steers them into a path of restoration and prosperity because of their faith and devotion to God and to each other. This song is written by Charles Gounod, and it's called Entreat Me Not to Leave Thee, or it's also called the Song of Ruth. And it goes like this. Ruth said, "Entreat me not to leave thee, entreat me not to leave thee, or to return from following after thee. For whither thou goest, I will go, and where thou lodgest, I will lodge. Whither thou goest, I will go, and where thou lodgest, I will lodge. Where thou lodgest, I will lodge. Thy people shall be my people, and thy God my God. Thy people shall be my people, and thy God my God. Thy people shall be my people, and thy God my God. Where thou diest will I die, and there will I be buried. The Lord do so to me, and more also, if aught but death part thee and me. If aught but death part thee and me. Thy people shall be my people, and thy God my God. Thy people shall be my people, and thy God my God. Thy people shall be my people, and thy God my God. Amen. Thanks for tuning in to this little light.